Welcome to the Ask Faleskini podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Wesley Belden from Nashville, Tennessee. Wesley has diverse interests, from finance to astrophysics. This gives him a well-rounded view of the world, resulting in unexpected insights. As a father, he doesn't believe in dumbing things down for kids. He has developed a skill for explaining complex ideas in simple and relatable ways to both adults and children. Wesley has worked in both the financial and entrepreneurial world, and he has studied sociology, chemistry, anthropology, and he has an MBA. He founded Raise Financial with a clear goal to change the way Americans build wealth. Without adequate capital, most Americans are sidelined from the greatest historical opportunity for wealth creation, the US equity market. With Raise Financial, this is about to change. Wesley, please tell us more about yourself. What is your story?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be on the show and participate in this great conversation. A little bit about me. I've always been interested by so many things. I've always had these myriad focus. Always interested in learning something new and expanding something. And I kind of thought that was me trying to find my way in the world. But what I realized is I'm just a very curious person. And what really draws me, what really motivates me, is being useful, is helping people, doing service, improving people's lives, and inputting, using my energies to produce some positive outcome. And that was kind of the common ethos between my entire childhood and then the early onset of my professional career. And it took me a while to really understand and connect with what that really was, and why certain things that I did, usually for other people, were really the things that got me going. They got me really excited, that made me feel good. And so I kind of keyed in on that, and that was what kind of made me split from my traditional professional career in finance, and started breaking out into my own. I'm doing my own thing and figuring out ways in which I can use my my skills and my insights to really help impact people and improve their lives. At this point, I had developed a pretty good resume in the financial space. That's where a lot of my professional understanding and experience was. And I figured, hey, this is great. We live in a capitalist society. If I want to help the most number of people, being able to use that knowledge and use that information and help translate the world in the language in which it's written into everyday people, and help them get control of their finances and produce economic security for themselves and their families.
Great. Would you share with us, because you have so many different interests, but you are still successful in every individual area that you set your goal to. For example, you studied so much different topics, and then you finish with a master's degree. Most of the people that are curious and are exploring so many different topics, they just can't get things together and finish anything. But you first finish with master's degree, then you're also doing so many things in business, but you're still successful in every endeavor. How do you focus? How do you find this energy? What's your secret? How do you get focused to do it, and just to finish things and to make it viable?
Sure. I think a lot of it comes down to, there isn't necessarily always going to be a balance. Sometimes to win and succeed, you almost have to just kind of blow the rails off and just kind of dive into it. And then when you start butting up against constraints, when you really are just running out of time or running out of things, then you got to start paring things down or prioritizing. But when I was getting my MBA, I was working 50, 60 hours a week and going to school at night. And you learn very quickly that you have to prioritize your time. But you're also more productive. Sometimes the more that you have to do, the more you get done. And so it's kind of like almost easier to say yes to more and then have to pare back as required. But really, it's just figuring out what's important and where you want to spend your time and how that needs to work, right? What's enriching you the most? What's keeping you on track? What does your 5-10-year plan look like? And what are the things that you're doing today, tomorrow, next week that keep you on that track? And then does that plan change as time goes on? If it does, then fix it. Like I remember, the beginning of every quarter in business school, they would hand out the syllabus for the course, and I would look at it and I would circle the things that I wasn't going to do. and you're looking at it and trying to figure out what you can, save yourself the time of doing without, what are the low priority things here that I can like cross off, because either I don't necessarily need to learn that because I already know it, or it doesn't have that big of an impact on, your grade for the class. And so figuring out like what you can kind of clear out to then focus your energies on things that are more impactful. But there is no real answer except, I guess distinguishing between things that, you want to learn because you're interested in it, and then things that you want to learn because you want to be impactful and succeed in those spaces. I like to say I'm a it's the old adage, like it was a jack of all, master of none. I like to say I'm a jack of all and now a master of a few. And I think picking those few that are going to put you on that track, and then understand that being, a jack of the others is going to give you insights, which are going to make you more, I think, powerful or productive in those spaces in which you are, a master of, right? I mean, everything in life, if you have a little bit of knowledge, you can put things into context more. You can be more, you're just more grounded in everything. You can adapt to more things. You can see things from a different light. Also, if you have that type of personality where you're just really interested in things, it gives me energy. I don't know. It's what I like to do. Some people like to go golfing. I like to learn new things.
Is there any book? For me, First Things First from Stephen Covey was paramount to start focusing and start shifting my focus from everything to the specific task I have to do. Is there a specific book that helped you? Is there a specific course or coach that helped you focus? Because this is a rare treat. So not many people are good in this. Did you have any?
I've never really had a book that kind of helps me focus on this. Potentially, but I think it is like that approach to curiosity. Like one of my favorite books was that book Sapiens by Harari, and it kind of shows how biology and over time made us move into these modern creatures, and how we're essentially 200,000-year-old hardware running modern software, and just understanding what these things are. And I think what that gave me was a framework to look at how we look and feel in today's society, understand that there are, reasons for it, and some of them aren't necessarily aware to us. And that kind of gave me the permission to look at myself and look what I was doing and understand where society, ends and I begin. And that's kind of the idea of giving yourself an identity, understanding what that identity is, and then looking in to understand who that person is, where you're succeeding, where you're failing, where you want to be better. And then just using that to constantly look at yourself and say, what's working and what isn't, and then trying new things. You got to experiment, right? So this year I've stopped listening to, it's not self-serving. I've stopped listening to podcasts in the morning. And the reason behind that is I was kind of just being bombarded with information, and, it was kind of almost distracting. And so it was just, in the background. I love it. I love to hear the news. I love to stay up to date, but I wanted to try something new. So I stopped listening to podcasts in the morning, started thinking about my day, framing my morning, and setting myself up to be in a good headspace to then go into work and do things. And, had that not worked or that not yielded fruit, I would have gone back to it. But for me, it wound up being a very positive change. And so now I've folded it into my daily routine where, I'll listen to music in the morning while I think about my day, as opposed to, really listening to what's happening, in the international markets, or, what's been going on in the world. You make space for that elsewhere.
Okay, great. I like when you're talking about framing. When we started communicating regarding this interview today, I looked into your business, Raise Capital, and having over 20 years experience in private banking, I was just amazed how Raise Capital addressed all of the issues at once. When I'm talking about all of the major issues is liquidity, so that people can move in and go out if they need to, and also flexibility, that they can adapt their monthly installment based on the paycheck they receive, or if they have additional money, they can just put more money in your product. And it's also a long-term product. And then you also have specific products for example, for tuitions, for mortgages, and similar. Can you explain a bit more how you decided what are the key advantages, because what I just explained, this liquidity and flexibility is probably the biggest advantage over investing directly in a ETF or similar.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a long relationship with liquidity, and thinking about how that's important in different frameworks, both from the micro and macro perspective. My first job out of college, I was working for an investment firm, doing credit analysis and investing in portfolio management of subprime corporate bank debt. And so that was kind of that adjacent industry to these subprime mortgage-backed securities that blew up the economy. Basically, it was the same thing, but instead of home mortgages, it was subprime corporate bank debt. And so looking at this, I think an ill-spoken of byproduct of the way that those structures were was that there was no liquidity in the system. So when it got to a position in which people had to divest themselves of these assets or these investments, there was no liquidity in the system, right? Like, and that just scared the shit out of me. Like, looking at this and realizing that just because you want to sell something doesn't mean you can sell something. And this is kind of what, looking at it at the individual perspective, this is what happened to a lot of people that had put a lot of their investments into these homes. Then they now had 1, 2, or 3 or adjustable rate mortgages on. All of a sudden, their home value dropped because everyone was trying to get out of these things. Homes were being foreclosed on. They were hitting the market. The home value was going down, and now the home was worth less than what you owed on it. So obviously, the smart financial decision there is to walk away and take the credit hit, because you're now underwater on it. So looking at this and understanding how liquidity has all of these, important features in it, that was always an important thing to me. Okay, so that stuck with me, that resonated with me. I scrolled it away, I buried it deep down inside. And then going forward, after we began building out our products, our first product that we built was Scholaraise, which is a collaborative crowdfunding college savings application. And the reasoning behind this was today's young parents, they don't really have the resources to invest in a college savings fund. They're trying to hit their, they're trying to pay off their own student loans. They're trying to, hit their employer's match on their retirement account. They're trying to save money to buy a house. Putting money into a college savings fund for an expense that may or may not occur in 18 years doesn't really fit in their stack of priorities. And so we looked at this and said, how can we take this product, which we know parents would like to be doing, but they can't fit into their budget, and how do we make it to where it does make sense for them? And what we did with that was we said, what if we made this shareable? So it's super easy for you to create this account, but you're not responsible for funding it. You give permission to your friends and family to fund this account. So instead of buying onesies, toys, so on and so forth, they put money into this account, it gets invested, and then it grows tax-free. To put that in perspective, the average 529 college savings fund has less than 1% of all dollars in it have been contributed from a friend or family member. And our plans, that number is 40%. So we've really created something where these plans now exist. They're invested in growing where they would not have existed before. And they have money in them that would not already be in them. It would be wasted on Legos or onesies or things like that. So that was kind of the kernel of the idea of how can we look at this audience? How can we listen to what makes them different? What makes this generation different than any other generation in American history? Their unique challenges and headwinds. How can we listen to them, understand what's important to them, and then build products that meet that need? And one of the biggest things that we look at here is the flexibility that is required from the uncertainty of where you're going to be. That could be switching jobs. That could be your career changing because your industry goes away. That could be so many different things. So liquidity and flexibility is an important component. And that's one of the core tenets that we went to task on building into our product.
One of my biggest, I'll say, problem that I had as an investment banker in Switzerland was relating to average person. How you are financially well off or above top 1% in US. How can you relate? How do you get information? Is that just statistic? Do you have any first-hand experience? How do you get information? What people need on the market? What is? How do you stay grounded? You said that your multidisciplinary approach helps you stay grounded. How do you stay grounded despite of all this success? How do you understand the market? What the average person needs?
You talk to people, right? I mean, that's the number one way. Like, you ask people what's going on with them. How's life going? what's going on in their space, right? And then on top of that, you talk to your customers because, they have a vested interest in what you're building. They are the person that you're trying to help. They're the target that you're working on. We also have a thing at Scholar Raise and Raise Financial where everyone in the company at some point jumps into doing customer support. So you'll have like a shift where any customer support ticket that comes in, it's your job to figure it out, to work with that customer and to help them through it. So that gives you, this. And this is everyone from our development staff to, our marketing team to myself. And what this means is their problems become your problems. And now you want to figure out how to fix that problem. And, because you want to get it off your plate. You want to fix your problem, which means you want to fix their problems. So you make their issues, quite literally your issues. And at that point, you're incentivized in the same way, right? And that incentivizes us to fix those things and to move through that. But the answer is people will tell you what's going on in their lives if you ask the right questions, and staying connected with that and organized with that. I mean, I'm further in my career, but, I was that person years ago. And I thought about it and looked at it and I got lucky. I showed up for work every day. I made some good decisions that I didn't know were going to be good decisions. But, the reality of it is it's not that far in my rearview mirror. You understand what it means to be, a young person trying to find your way in this world, thinking about the future, what you want out of life, how you're going to take care of yourself and ultimately your family someday.
Okay. What I would like to know is your take. Most of us from Generation X is well off financially, or we have some kind of way to get there. The millennials are much worse off than we are. What do you think? Are the millennials worse off, or is the generation coming after them in even a worse situation?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the younger generation is probably in a better situation because, well, let me back up. We look at a lot of different things with, kind of people in our millennial group when they come in, there's kind of this bifurcation of millennials in this space that we interface with. And the one that is really interesting, which I think is unique about this generation, is they kind of came of age, after the 2008, crisis, the financial crisis. And they lost all faith in these financial markets and these financial products, and they lost faith in banks. And they kind of looked at this and they said, this is all a scam. And they pulled their chips back. They didn't, get invested in or engage in the markets. And now you fast forward, what are we looking at? 15 years later, their peers that didn't pull their chips back are doing much better than they are. And so there's this whole need to catch up, but you've lost out on that time, and it's hard to catch up. So I think that's one of the unique millennial situations. Other things that are going on that are kind of impacting both millennials and, is it Gen Z after that, are kind of the same thing. We're looking at the fact that, since the 1970s, productivity in this country has skyrocketed, but at the same time, wages as adjusted for inflation have not increased at all. And so what that means is that productivity is being recapitalized to the bottom line, which is meaning it's being recapitalized to the people that own these businesses in the form of, their stock, right? So if you own the stock price is going to go up because productivity goes up and the cost of labor hasn't, right? So your inputs aren't going up in expense, but your outputs are going up in value. So that's ultimately what runs through there. So you've had stagnant wages and the raising rate of inflation, or the things that make a person middle class in America. So education costs a lot more today than it did, a generation ago. Textbooks cost a lot more. It's actually one of the few things that's outpaced the inflationary or the inflation of tuition is textbooks. And I think more importantly, one of the things that's always been categorized as what defines the middle class is a path to or the ability to own a home. And so, increasingly, if you live in the markets in which you're going to be earning a salary that you need to be successful and to get the most out of your skill set, you probably cannot afford a home in that marketplace. What's more is maybe you don't want to, because if you own that home, now you're tied to it and it reduces that amount of flexibility. And then you also look at, what's been going on more recently with the raise in mortgage rates. Just increasingly becomes unlikely that you're going to be able to own a home. That was always kind of one of those really big things of previous generations that backed people into a large appreciating asset over a long period of time. And then the addition, there was kind of that floor where no matter what happens, you're not going to be on the street because you own your home. So all of these different things, like the cost of just living, whether it's rent or your mortgage, that stuff is really skyrocketed. The things that help you upwardly mobile or worked upwardly mobile in different generations are less important now or more expensive. But what that means is we just need to be more creative about what we're doing and where we put our energies, and how we work this problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
but yeah, I don't know. I don't know who's worse off. I don't think there's anything wrong that can't be fixed with what's right, and I think it's just kind of a refocusing and a re-effort of really trying to understand the problem and how you can make it suit you.
So if I understand correctly, every generation has its challenges, but also its advantages. So
every generation has its challenges for sure, but this one seems a little bit different, like in the sense that, a 30-year-old today in America, for the first time in the history of America, is doing less well than their parents when they were 30 in aggregate. And that's like a staggering, that's like the breakdown of the American dream in the sense where it's like, that was kind of the compact, like every generation in America gets a little bit better, it does a little bit better. And this is the first time that's ever happened. It's a sobering statistic to look at.
Yeah, but do you think that is just if you look at the averages and statistics, but
Sure.
if we look at the top performers are much better off than they were like 10 years ago. If we just look at Elon Musk, the value of Tesla has just skyrocketed, even if the price is going down now. But
that's getting back to this. That's getting back to the same token that the economy as a whole has grown, right? We're producing more stuff. Our productivity has gone up. Our economy is strong, but where that's, being allocated is what's causing that differential, right? That's why it kind of bifurcates at the top. But yeah, being at the top is it's a lot different now than it used to be. The top is yeah. The economy has grown, but it's concentrating at the top. That's 100% right.
Mm-hmm. So working in financial institutions, I'm sure you have opinion on the following question I would like to ask you. Should financial institutions be local, national, or federal, or even global? Because in the olden days, we had our bank officer that knew us in person. Usually we were on a first name basis with him. He knew our credit. He knew our assets. So, and it was, everything was, I'd say, much easier, much more personal. Right
Sure.
now, every financial decision from financial company is almost purely based on credit score. What do you think about that?
So, I think there's a place, this is a great question. First of all, I think I always tend to want to lean towards local. I think local is always a better place to be. When you spend money locally, that money stays in your community. It makes your community a better place to live. It means your neighbors are doing better. It means that the people that you interface with, whether it's standing in line at the post office or dropping your kids off at school, they're happier, more productive, and doing, better. Like that's win-win-win all around. I think if you can inject your spending into your community, it may not be the least expensive place to spend your money, but it's going to be the most impactful, I think, for you, your family, and of course your community. But when it comes to finances, I think understanding that there's places for all of those things, right? Like I like that, my American Express card is international. It makes it easier when I travel. But if I'm going to take out a small business loan, if I go to my credit union around, the corner from, my house, who knows who I am, we go to the same church, or, we know each other from these different things. There's more degrees of contact and point that he can then use to assess my credit worthiness or my risk level, right? I mean, there's all kinds of ways to, and I think that makes them more comfortable. It makes them understand what's happening. You're a face instead of a number, right? And that's, I think anytime that there's a high impact decision like that, which, I mean, there's so many risks and factors that go into getting a business loan, right? Or a mortgage or these different things, that any more color or texture that you can have around that person, I think is always going to give you a much better, insight in the credit worthiness of that individual endeavor or, home price. So I think local is always better if you can do it. But there's also benefits of having kind of these global and international institutions as you work through it. But local, you can do it, man. It's the way. But credit scores, I mean, I take a lot of issue with credit scores. They kind of look at just these arbitrary things. There's so many ways to kind of game them. If you really want to focus on getting your credit score up, and like you got to ask yourself, like, is that really what is at the heart of what this number is trying to accomplish? Your ability to kind of game the system, or I think it doesn't take into account a lot of things. Also, you look at people that are just establishing themselves here, in America, like, I think in reality and face to face, they are very credit worthy, but their history maybe isn't there and they're not credit worthy on paper. So, how do you do things like get a car loan? How do you do things like, rent a place? It's problematic. I think we rely way too heavily on these credit scores and not enough on getting to know the individual and understanding where that works. I think finding ways to scale that is really important. And I think that's a lot of local and community banks.
Do you have global plans for raise capital, or is that just American thing for now?
I mean, I think the more people we can help, the happier we're going to be. There's no immediate plans for that. I mean, I think we've got a pretty big challenge here. We've got a lot of headwinds and a lot of people to help in America. But we would love to someday, if it's required, if it's needed. And that again comes down to understanding people in these other markets, understanding, what's going on overseas, and figuring out whether or not we can find a way to deploy this product in a way that suits those needs and suits those customers and really makes them better off in the long term. But we would love to.
So we covered that. Is that any, let's say, advice you would like to share with our listeners regarding how to go about building capital, especially entrepreneurs that have a huge fluctuation of incomes, especially in the beginning? You get a new customer, you get a lot of money, then you don't get another client for a couple of months, and all the stuff because you were an entrepreneur. How would
had chicken for lunch and feathers for dinner, right?
Yes. Exactly.
And that's always a unique challenge, like understanding like how that works and where that goes. If you are in that sort of situation, I would say like either planning around it, like when the money is coming in and when it's not, and planning accordingly, realizing that it's not always going to be that steady stream. I feel like that's less common for a lot of people, like that's, I think in entrepreneurship, that's maybe more common, but, for the average person, hopefully that's less of a thing. So yeah, I don't know. I think like understanding what's important and prioritizing where you spend your money, things that bring, you joy, that make you happy. That's maybe $1 there is maybe worth $1.10, as opposed to something that you spend on habitually that doesn't really make you happy. And then the beautiful thing about that is if you can remove your spending from things that aren't really important to you or don't improve your life, you can then use those funds to invest in something that's going to, make you better off in the future, right? And finding out things that are easy for you to invest in. And it really depends on where you are in your life. If you're pre having like a financial manager or advisor, like do basic things that scale easily, buy like a market-based ETF or like a target date, ETF, something like that, just to kind of get your money into something that's understood as far as a long-term investing axiom of basically spreading out and diversifying your funds. I don't know, if you want to pick and choose stocks, do that with a little bit of your money and have fun with it. But when it comes to long-term investing, invest in things that are really boring, and then just kind of have your money sit.
What would you say is the number one advice for liquidity? What would you invest your funds if you knew that potentially in 2 to 3 months you would need these funds to I don't know, purchase a new stock for your shop or something like that? What would be your go-to asset for that investment?
I mean, if I got to buy something in 2-3 months, I would say my number one asset would be cash, just to kind of make sure that you have it in that short term. That's such a short time horizon. But extending a little bit further out.
No treasury notes, nothing like that.
I mean, it's 2 months. I mean, you can. I mean, it depends on how much cash you're talking about. But I mean, you got to ask yourself if the juice is worth the squeeze. I mean, if we're talking about $20 or $30 million, then I think, yes, the juice is worth the squeeze.
Okay.
If you're talking about $20,000 or $30,000, then, is it really worth the effort of buying in and selling out? Making sure that obviously the account in which the money is held is FDIC insured is an important component. But yeah, there's a lot of things that you can always be doing that are more financially complicated and will yield better results, but is the complexity worth that to you as an individual? It's always a question that is an individual and case-by-case basis. But yeah, obviously treasuries are a good spot to safely park money. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Is that kind of a question you were asking as far as
yeah, I'm just thinking of I'm the huge I'm pro cash, so I always keep my liquidity high.
It's a nice cushion. I don't know, it helps me sleep at night, but you're also losing a lot to inflation these days, and but like there's a lot of the uncertainty, specifically short term. The equity markets, there's just so much volatility there right now. It's just kind of difficult to park anything there that you're going to need in the near term. Yeah, fixed income, I think, makes a lot more sense today than it did, obviously a year ago.
Okay, thank you for all the insights. Is there any advice you would give to Generation X and Millennials regarding how to invest? Is there any better way than, for example, invest in raise capital? We're talking about entrepreneur savvy people pushing 6 figures and more. What would you recommend for them? How to start and build equity for them?
Yeah, first place to start is to really get curious, understand what's out there and what this space looks like. And it doesn't mean that you have to get an MBA or a CFA or anything like that, but understand what the space looks like as it relates to you. Get interested in it, get focused on it, because you know what, it's really important. You go to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week to make all this money. You need to put a little bit of time and effort into figuring out how you deploy that capital and how you make that money work for you. And that means understanding where it's going, what you're spending it on, what's worthwhile for that, how you're investing it, what your time horizons are. All of these things, I promise you, they are things that you can do. They are not complicated. They're not, overly, it's almost like the only wrong decision is not making one. And I think kind of sitting down and understanding what is meaningful to you, what you want, setting goals, and then getting through it. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. Just get to work, get to thinking about this, get to making decisions, learn a little bit here, learn a little bit there. Talk to your friends about it, see what they're doing, talk to your family members, see what they're doing. Normalize having these conversations, because that is the way that we are going to win at this stuff, is by understanding what's happening, what people are doing, and how we can do it better. And the reality of it is, it maybe is a little bit harder for us now than it has been for previous generations, but this is something that we are totally capable of doing, and we can win at, and we can provide the same level of economic security, growth, and aspiration that previous generations have had. Because you know what, the world is full of lots of tools, it's full of lots of things that you can use, it's full of lots of opportunity. We just got to get out there and really focus on it and make our choices and carve our path and get to work.
Thank you for all these great insights. Is there anything else you would like to convey to our listeners
Sure. So
please.
I love sharing. I love sharing my insights. I also love hearing other people's insights. So if there's something that resonated with you that I said today, or there's something that maybe you disagree with, or you think I might be getting wrong, I would love to hear from your listeners. I would love to hear what their thoughts are on where I can get better, where I can understand more, how I can learn from them.
Okay, I will include links to where they can reach you and raise capital and other ventures that you are involved with in the description. Thank you, Wesley. It was really nice having you on the podcast. And thank you for being my guest tonight.
Thank you. This is a lot of fun.